Who dat to the Who Dat Nation? Welcome to the Dome Patrol podcast, your podcast for the New Orleans Saints here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and the New Orleans Saints have completed their home campaign for the 2024 NFL season. Unfortunately, we still have one more game to play this year, but Week 17 is in the books as the New Orleans Saints come up short, very short, very, very, very short against the Las Vegas Raiders this Sunday by the score of 25-10. This is the New Orleans Saints' third consecutive loss, and now they have dropped to 5-11 on the season with one game left to play. The Raiders, on the other hand, they improved to 4-12, which is kind of a win for us if we want to look at it from a draft position standpoint, where if the Raiders win next week and we lose next week, which probably going to do, this will help in the tiebreaker situation, to whereas the Saints will get a higher draft pick if that is what you're looking forward to. This was just, I don't know why this feels worse than the 34-0 loss. And I say feel worse. I'm not mad. It's to be expected at this point, and that's part of the problem. It's to be expected that the New Orleans Saints will lose. They just look bad, man. They look bad at this point. It's not even competitive. It's Cancun on 3 when they break the huddle. It's just, they're a shell of their former selves, and it's a far cry from what we saw week 1 and week 2. I've never seen a team digress like this fast, just completely implode within itself. Injuries, play calling, game management, game plans going into games. It's crazy. It's one of these situations where me personally, I'm pretty sure you can find another podcast, another content creator who follows the Saints, talk about the Saints, who can eloquently put it into words. Unfortunately, I can't. I just can't wrap my head around it. I cannot understand why this team looks like the worst team in football. Probably because they are the worst team in football. I think today it's pretty clear cut. It's there for you to glance upon in all of its glory. Losing or getting shut out by the Green Bay Packers, it's not the worst thing in the world, because the Green Bay Packers are a playoff team. They are a well-coached team. They are a really good team that can make some noise in the playoffs. Am I saying they can get to the Super Bowl? I'm not saying all that, but it wouldn't shock me if they do, because they are just that good of a team. So losing to them, that's fine. But losing to a 3-12 team that averaged 3.3 yards per carry all season, come into the Dome after their flight was delayed. They didn't get here till, I guess you can say, late last night or early this morning. Get off the plane, hop on a bus, come to the Dome, and run just rampant over this defense. Abdullah hasn't had a 100-yard rushing game in his entire career. He had one today. The Raiders haven't had 100 yards rushing all season long in a game. They did it today. Aiden O'Connell, I don't think, ever looked this good. He looked like the second coming of Rich Gannon out there. It was just amazing to watch. Defensively, offensively, with the undisciplined play The fact that in the first half, Spencer Rattler looked amazing. Spencer Rattler, I think he only had 2 incompletions in the first half, and one of them was a drop. If I think back or look back, I, possibly both of them were drops in that first half. He was surgical in the first half. Come out in the second half, it's like somebody switched jerseys with him and went out there and played. I don't know what happened. I don't get it. The false starts, the illegal formations, the offensive pass interference calls, it's stupid stuff like that. Just kills drives, drop passes, kills drive. Unable to block this defensive pressure from Las Vegas was unbelievable to me. It just like they gave up. They clearly gave up on this team. They on this season, I should say, probably the team too, but they gave up, and it's sad to watch. It was really a chore to watch. To be honest with you, in the second half, I can tell you bits and pieces, but the game was on, but I was doing other things. I was really listening to it. I wasn't watching it, being 100% honest, because I knew what was going to happen. Not so much, not the whole first half. It was really the fourth quarter. I gave up. It was making my eyeballs bleed. It was hard to watch. But this team is next week cannot come soon enough. It really can't. This season needs to be put out of his misery. Real talk. Speaking of Spencer Rattler in the first half, like I said, he was surgical. He was 11 for 13, 146 yards and a touchdown in that first half. But it really couldn't generate, he couldn't generate much offense in that second half. He did nothing. He ended up finishing 20 for 36, 218 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. The Saints were 1 for 9 on third down today. 1 for 9 on third down. Kendre Miller, somebody that me and my cousin was discussing in the first half. In the first half, we were just talking about Kendre Miller, and he was like, man, he needs to get the ball more. And I'm like, look, I've seen enough from Kendre Miller. I really didn't, as far as analysis, I don't need, or an evaluation, I should say, I really didn't need to see anything from Kendre Miller. I know who he is. And my cousin said something that was so poignant and profound at that moment. He was like, well, it's not so much his production. I want to see if he can finish a game. And I was kind of taken aback by that, because I was like, man, I could care less about that right now. I'm looking for other things, other elements that, going forward we can use. But it was still festering in my head. Lo and behold, in the second quarter, he goes out. Next thing you know, we see him going into the tent. And I was like, cuz, did you see that? It was like, I got my answer. That's what it I said, you got it all right. And sure enough, he ended up getting a concussion, which is not the end of the world in Kendre Miller's world, because normally when it comes to Kendre Miller is soft tissue damage or ligament damage. So him getting a concussion, I'll take. But it is just, this dude is the most unlucky guy. He must have had an affair with one of these voodoo priestess down here or something. I don't know what happened, but he is cursed. This dude cannot stay healthy, and I see the talent there. I love Kendre Miller when he's on the field. The dude can run the ball. He has all of the elements of a Alvin Kamara. Is he Alvin Kamara clear replacement? No, I'm not going that far, but he is a good addition, a good companion for Alvin Kamara if these dudes can get on the field together, and we cannot get them on the field together. He had an increased workload today, but it didn't last long. Now, shockingly, I guess thankfully the Saints signed Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week, and he ended up getting 5 carries today for 20 yards. So he did something, but even with that, that ain't enough. They still didn't run the ball. It I don't get it. I don't get it. They will not protect Spencer Rattler. And you know what we're going to hear all week? You know what? I bet you dollars to donuts. What you're going to hear all week is how bad Spencer Rattler is. Spencer Rattler did not have a great game. He started off great, but didn't end it great. But with that being said, he didn't have a lot of help. A lot of drop passes. A lot of unblocked defensive linemen in his face. It was a lot, you know? And I'm not trying to make excuses for him. Like I said, one of those interceptions, his first interception, that was on him. I feel that was a bad throw. He shouldn't have thrown that. But, well, the guy was open. It was just a bad throw. The second one, he was baited into. And I understand in the fourth quarter, it really, the game had got out of control. And Saints turned one-dimensional. I'm not talking about the fourth. I'm talking about the other 3 quarters when they could have controlled the pace of the game. But you get in these 3rd and long situations, hence the 1 and 9 for 3rd downs that the Saints got into. Now, the Saints only scored that 1 touchdown, and that was off some trickery, which was a nice play call by Clint Kubiak. I got to give the devil his due there. They were trailing by 3 at that point. Tried that, what they call it, the end around or whatever. Nice flea flicker or something, whatever. But it was nice. Nice play call. But it was all set up by the run. It was set up by the run. And this is the reason why I just want to have a sit down with Clint Kubiak to see where his head is. Because he shows that he can call or design some really good plays and know how to set them up. But it's so sparingly. You telling me, and I'm going by his actions here, you're telling me that you know what it takes to get these plays launched, to get these innovative new offensive plays ran here in New Orleans, but you refuse to do it. Plays like that, deep passes, it can only be set up with the run. Play action. Dump offs, dinking and dunking, screen passes, stuff like that. That is what sets up the big plays down the field, but they don't do it. The Saints defense forced the Raiders to kick 4 field goals today. 4. Now, under any other circumstances, that would be great. That would be great. But they struggled to stop the run. And it's weird to say the Las Vegas Raiders run attack, something they don't have. Amir Abdullah had 115 yards on 20 carries today. This is the first 100-yard game of his NFL career. If you listen to this show long enough, you know that I always mention how the Saints always be somebody's first. They're always their first something. Either their first touchdown, they'll get their first win, they'll get their first 100-yard receiving, or in this case, 100-yard rushing. It's always something. They're going to break a streak when it comes to New Orleans, whoever is playing against the Saints. Every rip, and they did it today. I'm somewhat happy about it. It's a little bittersweet because Abdullah is on my fantasy team. So he got me some points today. But other than that, man, this is embarrassing that you allow this dude to run clean over you. A dude that averages 3 yards a carry the entire season. Obviously, because he hasn't had a 100-yard rushing game yet in his career. And it could have been worse. It should have been worse. I don't know what to say. Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders, I guess you could say the replacement for Derek Carr. He had a solid game. He was 20 for 35, 204 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. He looked really good out there today. Cam Jordan, early on, he looked like he was a man possessed. He looked like, now bear with me here, he looked like this was his last game in the dome. It's like he sensed it. He knew this was it for him. And he started off looking like that. He was he was all over the Raiders offensive line. He even got I think he had a tackle for a loss. This was on that big goal line stand that they had early on in the game. He ended up getting a sack on O'Connell, which they had to settle for a field goal. It was amazing, man. He had an amazing game in the first quarter, and then disappeared. There was some bad news, I guess you could say. Well, I ain't guessing. It is bad news. Rookie linebacker Jalen Ford, he was carted off the field in the fourth quarter after getting hurt. And looking at him on that cart, they had the air cast on his leg. That's not a good sign. Peyton Turner, he left the game early with an ankle injury. Marquez Vazquez Scantling, he left the game after a hard hit late in the game. It was, I just don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about this team. The Saints will close out the season when they travel to Tampa Bay next week to take on the Buccaneers, who won today and still fighting for the division between them and the Atlanta Falcons, who plays Monday. I think Atlanta plays Monday night. But yeah, they still fighting for something. So that's not going to be an easy game next week. I don't see them winning that game. This was the one game that I knew for certain the Saints probably should win, and they end up getting squashed by 15 points at home. And so I have zero confidence with them going to Tampa and getting that victory. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's go over the stats of this Week 17 matchup against the Raiders, beginning with the passing leaders for the Las Vegas Raiders. Aiden O'Connell, he was 20 for 35, 242 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was only sacked one time today. For the New Orleans Saints, Spencer Rattler, he was 20 for 36, 218 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions, and he was sacked 3 times today. Leading rusher for the Raiders, it was Amir Abdullah, 20 carries for 15 yards. For the Saints, Spencer Rattler, 3 carries for 46 yards. Leading receiver for both teams, beginning with the Raiders, it was Brock Bowens, which shouldn't be a shock because their leading receiver of the season. He had 7 catches for 77 yards. For the New Orleans Saints, it was Juwan Johnson, who had 6 catches for 66 yards. That's not a good number. That's not a good number, and especially the way he played today. That's fitting for him. The leading tackler for both teams, the Raiders, Robert Spellett, had 8 tackles. For the Saints, it was Pete Warner with 13. Moving over to team stats, beginning with first downs, the Raiders had 22 first downs. Saints had 13. What can I say? Third down efficiency, like I said before, the Saints were 1 for 10 on third down. I said 1 for 9 earlier. It's actually 1 for 10 on third down. Raiders, on the other hand, were 10 for 18 on third down. Saints went for it on fourth once and converted it, whereas the Raiders never went for it on fourth because they didn't have to when you're 10 for 18. Total plays ran. Raiders ran 74 total plays to New Orleans 53. Total yardage, Raiders 388 yards to the Saints 269. Both teams had 11 drives apiece. Raiders 5.2 yards per play. Saints 5.1 yards per play. Passing yardage, Raiders had 232 yards to the Saints 188. Rushing, This is embarrassing. The Raiders had 156 rushing yards today to the Saints 81. And to put it in perspective, the Raiders did improve their lead average. They averaged 4.1 yard per carry today to the Saints 6.2, and that's mainly because of Rattler had, I think, 2 or 3 big runs, and it like a 20-yarder and so on and so forth. So that kind of inflates the average, but yeah, that's what happened there. Red zone, Raiders were 2 for 4. Saints 0 for 1. Penalties today, which was another bugaboo. The Raiders, they were 3 for 20. Decent for the Raiders. That sounds like a disciplined team to me. On the other hand, the New Orleans Saints, 10 penalties today for 85 yards. 10. And those, a majority of those were like third down. It was on third down on both sides of the ball. They killed drives and kept drives alive for the Raiders. Yeah, it was sad. Saints turned the ball over twice. Raiders didn't turn it over at all. Time of possession, Raiders had the ball for 37 minutes and 50 seconds to the Saints, 22 minutes and 10 seconds. Let's move on to our ratings. Rating for today's game against the Las Vegas Raiders. As you know, we grade every facet of the New Orleans Saints in their performance against the Raiders today. Offense, defense, special teams, and coaching. Average them out and give an overall grade of this game. Starting with offense today gets a C-. They had a good start to this game. That's the only thing that saved it. Otherwise, it would have been rated very low. But the first half was pretty decent. Second half, they only ran, 3 plays on the opposite side of the 50 in the Raiders territory throughout the entire second half. And I'm giving it 3. I think it was like 2. So, no, it could have been 1. But either way, 1, 2, 3, it could be 5. It's embarrassing. Offense gets a C-. Defense gets a D. The defense, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. They really should be ashamed of themselves. There was a play where Tyrann Mathieu, the honey badger, laid up there, and the running back busts through the line, right? Tyrann Mathieu comes around, face mask tugs the dude. He got lucky, didn't get a flag called on him, but I guess it was embarrassing enough because he face masked. The dude did a matrix bend backwards type move, and he popped back up and ran for 10 more yards. You couldn't even tackle. It was amazing. The secondary looked so bad. They always out of position. Their best weapon, Bowers, was open the entire game. All 7 is, I think 6 out of the 7 were uncontested. He was just wide open. It was, they get a D. Special teams gets an A. Our punter has shown to be a good get, and Blake Grupe made his extra point and made the field goal that he was asked upon to do. Special teams, cool. And you had some good special teams coverage, fielding punts and stuff like that. So they get an A. The one shining spot on this team today. Coaching gets a D+. I'm so sick of this team. I'm so sick of the game plans going into this game. Well, every game this year, they cannot game plan. Now, I don't want to hear about, it was a short week. You had the Monday night game, then you had Christmas, and we had to get prepared for this game. So Christmas only happened here in New Orleans, not in Las Vegas, because those guys, it didn't affect them. Not only did it not affect them, their flight was delayed. They didn't even get here when they were supposed to. All their timing was thrown off. And if you ever played sports and traveled, you know that all that is important. Your schedule, it's important. That didn't affect them. They were ready to play. They being the Las Vegas Raiders. They were ready to play. And they played. And they demolished the New Orleans Saints. Overall, today, the New Orleans Saints performance as a whole gets a D. Oh boy. I'm gonna say something that I know is gonna come off as controversial, gonna come off as, oh, you're not a real Saints fan, you're not a who that. Well, you know what? I don't care. Because a real who that is supposed to speak the truth. That's our job, man. Call it what it is. This team is hot garbage. I'm so glad that this season is over. I am so glad that we only have one more week to have to suffer through this inconsistent, incompetent piece of an organization. And it's not just the Saints. Have y'all been watching the Pelicans lately? I mean, it's just horrible to watch. This is some horrible football to watch. Like I always say, I can deal with losing. All right, we lose. That's fine. You can't win them all. But my God, you playing a team that only won 3 games. Yeah, I know we only won 5, but we won 2 more than them. We're at home. We got, I will go as far to say we have the most talent than the Raiders. Can you pick anybody on the Raiders that you can, look at and be like, oh man, we got to watch out for him? Bowers maybe, but he's a rookie. He's coming upon this year, and you only know his name because he done set some records as a rookie. But aside from that, who on that team you look at as a threat on either side of the ball? I'll wait. But the Saints, on the other hand, we have a ton of injuries. Let's not glance past that. Yes, we have injuries, but we still have capable players. At least I thought that we had capable players to at least beat this team, a team that can't run the ball. That's the one thing. That's the one thing that I can't wrap my head around. This is a team that couldn't run the ball to save their life all season long, but they managed to get 156 yards as a team today, something they have not done all season. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And I can't wait for this to be over. And just to give a preview of what we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks when we do our season wrap up here on the Dome Patrol. This is going to be the biggest decision in the history of the New Orleans Saints franchise coming up when it comes to picking and hiring the next head coach of the Saints. This is monumental because if you whiff on this hire, if you pull another Dennis Allen caliber hire here, you might as well pack it in. It's no point watching the Saints no more. It don't make sense to try. It don't make sense to cheer on a team that is not trying to do anything. They're not trying to win. They're just looking out for their people or whatever the case may be. The Saints need to make the right choice. You're hearing reports about Aaron Glenn, and I like Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn used to play for the Saints, let alone used to coach for the Saints, and he's doing a phenomenal job as the defensive coordinator in Detroit. I'm not 100% with that decision. Would it make sense? Sure, because he knows the organization and this, that, and the third. Sure. But I'm not 100% with it because, number one, he's a defensive coordinator. The Saints need an offensive-minded coach here. They really do. To develop, i.e., a Spencer Rattler or a Jake Hader, or dare I say, a Derek Carr. There's a lot that needs to get done here as far as this offense and what it's capable of and what can be improved upon with the talent that we have. Because there's been zero improvement on that offensive side of the ball. Well, on the defense either, but even more so on offense. That offense looks horrible. That offense looks like Pete Carmichael clone. It's the same offense. All this hoopla. They hired Clint Kubiak. Oh, he comes from the Shanahan tree and blah blah blah. It's the same offense as Pete Carmichael. The only difference is there's a little flash every now and then. Every now and then, he'll run a play that you don't expect. It come out of nowhere or something to that effect. It is every now and then. Pete Carmichael, run. Throw. Punt. Throw. Third and long, run. It's like the stupidest stuff I ever saw in my life. But anywho, yes, this is going to be the biggest decision to make, and they need to choose wisely. Going back to this pick, everybody is high on the hog about getting a top 10 pick. I'm not. Once again, not confident in it. Why? Because Mickey Loomis is here. You're not solving it. You didn't solve anything in that arena when you fired Dennis Allen, because Dennis Allen didn't make those choices. He's too much of an idiot to make those choices. He couldn't pick a backup quarterback to go in the season with. So you gonna lead me to believe that he made choices on draft day? Man, miss me with that. This was all Mickey Loomis. Mickey Loomis gonna make that choice, and I'm not confident he can make the right choice. Trevor Penning. Hello. He can't make those right decisions. Cesar Ruiz. Now I know Cesar Ruiz turned out to be a pretty good offensive lineman, but was he worth a first round pick? I'm more than certain he would have been there the second or third round. I'm willing to put money on it, but we'll never know, because the Saints picked him in the first round. They have whiffed time and time again with these first round picks. And so what has happened in the last year that makes you feel confident that the Saints are going to make the right choice here? Because you have to ask yourself, where are we picking? What are we going to use with that top 10 pick? Because you need help everywhere. Everywhere, Kevin? Everywhere. There's not a position on this team that does not need to be addressed. Every single one. So where do you start? Do you start offensive linemen again that they have been whiffing on for years? Do you go wide receiver, which is a desperate need? Do you go running back that, once again, you're whiffing? Yeah, Kendra Miller, good running back, can't stay on the field. Defensive line, need help. Once again, you drafted Isaac Forsky, not worked out. The only one that semi-worked out is Brian Brissy, and he is not 100 on that defensive line, I should say, because he can't stop the run. So he's a liability in the run game. So whenever they running the ball, you got to take him out. Linebacker, Demario Davis, God bless you. I love you. One of the greatest men, one of the greatest linebackers we've ever had. It's over, man. Father Time has slapped him in the face. It's here. I'm sorry, you're old. Pete Warner, I liked Pete Warner. Pete Warner isn't what he used to be, especially after all those injuries. I don't know if that's affecting how he played, but he does not look like the same Pete Warner. And secondary is maybe the one position that really don't need immediate addressing, but it needs to be addressed. Honey Badger needs to go. Your corners now, Adebo, he was hurt, but Adebo is a walking PI, so you have to be conscious of that. And the other cats, I don't know, man. I don't know. But all that goes with your defensive coordinator. What defensive coordinator staff is going to come in with the new head coach? So some of these things can be addressed pending your coaching staff, who you bring in here. Um, but we'll wait and see. But like I said, we'll address all that. I went on the rant. That's half of the wrap up show right there. but it was just on my mind to talk about it. But I would like to know, what do you think? Do you think the Saints, or should I put it? Let me word it this way. Where do you think the Saints need to go as far as addressing the biggest need, whether it be free agency or the draft? Where do you think the Saints should start after they get the head coach? I would love to know your thoughts. And how did you feel about this game? Were you just as embarrassed as I was? This was more embarrassing than the Green Bay. I'm telling you, it was super embarrassing that them dudes went out there and put up this type of performance at home. Last game in the Dome this season. And they couldn't even give the Who Dat Nation something to cheer for in their home stadium. What are your thoughts? Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the Dome Patrol Podcast, your podcast for the New Orleans Saints here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this recap and reaction to the Saints losing to the Las Vegas Raiders in their Week 17 matchup by the score of 25-10. Saints are now 5-11. Oh boy, one more to go. I will talk to you next week in the new year. And by the way, speaking of which, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that you have a safe and fun new year in the next couple of days and bring in 2025 on a happy note, because the Saints ain't helped us out. They didn't help us out for Christmas, and they didn't help us out for New Year. And so I hope that you find a way to find joy in a productive and safe way. But we will talk again in the new year in 2025 as the Saints wrap up this monstrosity of a season when they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next Sunday from Tampa Bay. Until then, I'm going to be screaming to the top of my lungs, Happy New Year, and who dat?